and welcome to today's webinar. I hope everybody can see us. This is Fionn and Daniel speaking. Welcome to the webinar. This webinar is actually a cooperation of us, Searchmetrics, provider of a search and content platform, software as a service, and Saxido, content marketing agency with a focus on the conception of tailored content and high-performing seeding. And you all can see the topic of this webinar, today's webinar, already on your screen. So we will talk about content marketing from a linguistic perspective and show you how to create performing content based on a scientific approach. Actually, this webinar is based on a white paper, which has also been created as a joint venture of Saxido and Searchmetrics last year already. Actually, I guess some of you may have read the white paper already. For those of you who haven't, it's available in the download section of the knowledge base of the Searchmetrics website. And I will provide you with a link later in case you haven't read the white paper yet. But first of all, let me introduce you to the host of this webinar. This is me. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm director of the regional marketing team in EMEA here in the Berlin office of Searchmetrics. And over there, a few kilometers from here in the Saxido office in the Schönhauser Straße, also in Berlin, sits my friend Fionn. Hey, Fionn.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, good to be here. This is a very exciting topic, and I'm really glad to be here. And if any of you have been wondering in the past why the linguistic course that they took in college, why they took it, and what it contributed to their career, we've definitely got some answers for you in this webinar. And for everybody else, it's, I guess, pretty interesting to see how a scientific approach will be applied here in terms of SEO. So let's start off with the webinar.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fionn. And before starting with the topics, some organizational stuff for you. So how to deal with this audience console in case you may not be familiar with it. At any time, you can ask questions via the Q&A button. You will be able to contact us via the speaker button. If you have technical problems, you can also contact us. I have a colleague sitting next to me who will answer your questions. First option should always be to reload your browser. That solves most of the problems. Moreover, you have the possibility to click some further links in the knowledge base. And then organizational stuff. We will have a quick survey at the end of the webinar. So appreciate if you would hang in there and spend 30 seconds and answer 3 quick questions for us. That would help us a lot. And afterwards, I would say, let's say 1 week from now, we will get an email with a recording of the webinar. Okay, then let's jump into the agenda. I will turn off my camera now so you can make your screen even bigger. So we will start with a basic introduction into text linguistics and tell you what is a text. Then I will provide you with some development of linguistics as a science. Then afterwards, I will hand over to Fionn, who will show you some Google patents, then potentials of existing technologies. Then he will give you 1 or 2 examples of how to sell a commodity. And last but not least, he will introduce the EPST model to you. Next slide. Let's start with a quick overview of general linguistics. So that's basically the fields we will touch. Not a big or deep level of detail here, so don't be afraid. Just to give you a quick overview. On the left-hand side, you see the most basic fields of linguistics, which is lexicology, which deals with vocabulary and the structure and meaning of verbal expressions, so to speak, the connections between words. Then we have the graphemics, which deals with writing or script systems. Then, of course, we have phonetics, which deals with the sound production and perception. So that means acoustic characteristics of sounds. Then, very important for this webinar is syntax. That means that it's a system of grammatical rules for the combination of signs. and how to use verbal units in a sentence correctly from a grammatical perspective. Then also very important for this webinar is the concept of semantics, which is basically the meaning of science. So it's a system to how to interpret the combinations and rules known by syntax. Then as a even higher level of syntax and semantics is pragmatics. That's goes even beyond texts. So that's more or less the context and non-literal meaning of verbal expressions in specific situations. That means in a given situation, basically the meaning of a text can be totally different from its usual meaning. And last but not least, we have the phonology, which deals basically with the function and meaning of sounds within a language system. And focus of this webinar is text linguistics. You can see this at the bottom right of this slide. So this is not one of the main fields of linguistics, but it basically touches most of them. And in this webinar, we will touch lexicology, graphemics, but most of our syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. First of all, I want to give you a quick overview of what is a text, and I have brought 3 examples for you. So I guess most of you would consider this one as a text because it basically consists of text. But the next example also is text, which is a combination of text and images. And the third example, is also a text because this is a button which is much more than the button itself. So in this introduction to linguistics and the development, I want to give you a quick overview how the understanding of text itself have changed over time. Now let's look at this nice little animation here. So this is a very rough overview of the different levels of development of linguistic concepts and their notion in science during the last 70 years. From left to right, it basically gets more and more complex. In the 50s, the word and syntactical relations have been in the center of everything. Then in the 90s, people started to focus more on meaning. That means semantic relations of words beyond their grammatical structure. And finally, today, we're even looking beyond text, and it's common knowledge that the grammatic function of a text can be totally different from its syntactical or semantic meaning. So more on that later. Let's dig a little deeper into these different levels now quickly and start with the first level, which is syntax. And then let's ask you a question, what is a text? And a text is any passage, spoken or written of whatever length, that does form a unified whole. So a text is a unit of language in use. That means in the 50s, the notion was words as the most important element. Text is more or less the combination of words. So that means the notion of reference, for example, if you have pronouns, text consists of sub clauses and the coordination of clauses, and text has some continuity of grammatical elements, most of all tempers or verb variants. Then in the 90s, there got one level on top. So that means syntactic rules are still true, but there must be some reference between the words that can be described by grammatical rules only. At least that was the notion. So that means the relation between the words and not only their grammatical relation is in the focus. Syntax is still true because the text needs proper grammatical rules. But on top, it's important what's the logic of words and their combination. So is that text understandable? Which words do belong to similar groups regarding their meaning? Or what is a topic and how does a topic develop using words and their relation? What kind of text is it? Is it an explanation or a tutorial, or is it even literature? And here we can find even the first analogy to development of online marketing. So if you think of syntax or the focus on words only, there's a parallel between the development of SEO, search engine optimization, because I think in the late 2000s or even 2010, 2011, the word was still in the focus, namely the keyword. And now, 7-8 years later, semantics and topics and topic cluster get even more important. So search engines do not look at the at single words and keywords only. pages are not optimized for single keywords anymore, but for whole topics. And now let's go even one level higher. Oh, I said that already, sorry. Next slide. Now let's go even one level higher, namely beyond textual structure. There is one deeper level, which is pragmatics. That means the purpose of verbal communicative actions. So there must be more than words and their relations. That means some kind of communication aspects. That means a text is defined by what the sender wants to achieve and what the receiver understands. That can be an obligation, namely a contract, or contact. You all know messengers like WhatsApp or Skype, or there can be a simple declaration which is just some kind of explanation. So now I want to give you two more examples out of the level of pragmatics. You can see that at the bottom of this page with implication and deixis. So that means basically a text can be much more than its syntactical meaning. And one example would be the text, the door is open. That can mean so much more than just the door is open, depending on the emotion or the context the sender and the perceiver are in. Imagine a situation where somebody knocks on the door and the other one says, the door is open, then that means, yes, please come in. Or imagine another situation when you argue with someone and you tell them, hey, get out, the door is open. That means the person is supposed to leave the room. So that's basically what's behind pragmatics. Now, two other examples. First one is deixis. That means it's the notion of what is here and now. Deixis can be the points to a point in time or a location. That means words like here, now, there, or I don't know, in Berlin or in London or something. And a good example of how machines deal with deixis or are not yet able to deal with deixis is when you write somebody a message in a messenger of your choice. I mean, I guess most of you know that. Imagine I wrote Fionn in a message yesterday, hey Fionn, let's meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. And talk about our webinar. And if Fionn has read the message yesterday, he would be able to click on the word tomorrow in the text because it's often underlined in messengers like WhatsApp. And then you can directly jump into a calendar and create a calendar entry, so schedule a meeting or something like that. But imagine Fionn would have read the message only in the morning today. Then he would also read the word tomorrow and would have clicked on it. But the machine wouldn't be able to understand that the calendar entry needs to be scheduled for actually today, which is today, Tuesday and not Wednesday. And that is still difficult for machines to learn. So the difference between today and yesterday and deictic elements, so to speak, but that's, of course, a thing that can be changed because you all know that messages are sent with a timestamp. So that's just another step for machines to interpret timestamps together with those deictic elements. Another example from deixis is verbal means. So that means something like irony or sarcasm. Imagine you speak with your voice assistant of your choice, and you say, hey, Google, please play some music. And then it's not loud enough for you. So you say, OK, Google, please turn that sound louder. And Google starts to play that sound really, really loud. So people would like to maybe to go like, OK, Google, don't you turn that sound even louder, which means the opposite of that syntactical means. But Google wouldn't be able to understand that because it needs to be interpreted in the context the machines and the sender and the receiver are in, and that's most of the one of the most difficult and complex areas of linguistics. So to end my part with, again, a quick overview over the last 70 years of the rough development I just provided you with. So first, pretty simple syntactical rules, focus on the word. Second, one level higher, semantics, the relation and the meaning behind words. And then the third level is even pragmatics, which is even beyond the text. Focus on the function, and they're highly dependent on the context and something like verbal means of expressions. Last slide from me before I hand over to Fionn, who will give you more input on that, is the question of specific of online text. So what do online texts different from text in the past, which have mostly been printed out? Here are 5 characteristics of online text. The first one is hypertextuality. That means you can assign a word a function that it hasn't had before. So you can just assign the function to a word, hey, you are a word or a phrase that links to another text. So that would be a hyperlink. Then you can add images or voicemails or videos to that text, which would be multimodality. Then, of course, you can go ahead and change your online text all the time, so that the text would be available via the same URL, so stick in the same place, but it would be able to change and be optimized and some text edit and stuff like that. Then, of course, you have the option to communicate in the, via online media, so you can use forums, or people will be able to chat or comment or like and share your content. And last but not least, which is also very important in our business, is of course the measurability of online content. So basically you can see who comes to visit my content, how long do people stay on my page, do they interact with elements of the text, or do they click, comment, like, or share? What do they do afterwards? Do they have another click on my page and stuff like that? So that means syntax and semantics are pretty well covered by online text already, but pragmatics is still a bit difficult. So, and that's where I actually want to hand over to Fionn, who wants to tell us how those things may look in the near future. Fionn, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Daniel. Well, the question is how linguistics apply to search engines. And first of all, I'd like to look into the future and look at, what's going to be changing. And there are some revolutionary changes that are on the horizon right now. And I'd like to quote Sundar Pichai. He's the CEO of Google. And he's saying, looking to the future, the next big step will be for the very concept of the device to fade away. Over time, the computer itself, whatever its form factor, will be an intelligent assistant, helping you through your day. We will move from mobile first to an AI first world. And that means, it could be any device, that you're communicating with on a voice level. But in order for that to work effectively, we have to look at pragmatics from a linguistic perspective, because there's so much that's being lost in language because the context is not being understood. And this is something that Google is working on right now, and the algorithm is changing right now as well. And we'll get to that later. We will show you some techniques and examples of how you get pragmatics into your online content. But first of all, I'd like to talk about recent innovations. And the X Development LLC company is pretty much Google's innovation lab, and they're working on some future technologies. And I'd like to point to a Google patent, and that Google patent is concerned with augmentations of communications for emotional data. And so the title itself sort of raised my curiosity, and then I went into it, and it's pretty amazing because when you look at it, they actually use sort of like linguistic terminology to describe the sort of technology they're promoting in the future. I'd like to quote from that. So it's a pragmatic focus. As such, emotional information that is observed by the recipient of spoken words can add to or change the meaning of words. This is just what Daniel said from a linguistic scientific perspective. For instance, the inflection of a speaker's voice and the speaker's nonverbal gestures and facial expressions can all add to significantly change the meaning of words. Computer-based communications such as text message, email, and so on can often lose meaning because they fail to properly convey emotional information corresponding to the actual speech. And so this patent is focused on changing that. Now, this is an augmentative and alternative communication device. They actually use that in linguistics, but they use that for speech development for people who have disabilities, and there's much more on the horizon. For example, and this is something that the patent is addressing. There's sensory machine interpretation, and what we've done, or what I've done, is I've looked at sort of like patents and technologies that are out there already that you can actually buy and use. But they're separate technologies. They're not in one device. But what I found was you have face tracking cameras that track micro facial expressions and show the authenticity of emotions. That's already available. You have microphones tracking speech patterns and pitch, indicating our emotional stage and physical well-being. We have eye tracking cameras that, based on the pupils, will show how hard the brain works. You have biometric sensors that measure the chemical composition of our breath, indicating our emotions. You have infrared cameras that show the body heat and the emotional status, stress, interest, and enthusiasm. So you have all these machines that already exist, and you could put them together. Plus, you could use a machine learning algorithm for a precise interpretation of those signals. So that's pretty amazing, and that's what they show here in that Google pattern. They show all of these elements. They say all of these elements can be interpreted for communication augmentation, and this is sort of the future, because now we are talking about voice search, but what's beyond that is sort of like augmented reality or even mixed reality. We're going to communicate with our devices in a totally different manner. And this is sort of the bad news. It's the end of the poker face. And, particularly in Germany, I must say, and this is sort of like a cultural thing, people are quite anxious about those type of technologies, and they're resistant in adapting them, and the adaptation will play a huge factor in whether those technologies will succeed or not. But there are a lot of reasons why they should succeed. And now I'll quote Dr. Poppy Crum. She's chief scientist at Dolby Laboratories, and she says sensory technology can listen, provide insights, and predict behavior. Sensory technology can also identify the mental and physical health of human beings. And so there's a lot that this sensory technology can do that can actually improve your life. And in the end, we usually decide to improve our lives and to make our lives more convenient. And that's why I think those technologies will actually be adopted by the users. So you have sort of like a happiness and health device. It gives you better information because it adapts to your emotional state and can interpret what you say much more easily. You have higher connectability to your friends, better health, less effort, more time. And this is what these devices can offer. And actually, the future is sort of already here. I don't know if you know this example, but at Google I/O 2018, was an assistant talking to a hair salon, and it was so real. It was so realistic. You couldn't even understand that it was an assistant. So that was quite amazing. And actually, in the end, there were a lot of critical voices, and Google sort of said, well, we're going to make the assistant sound more like a computer because otherwise people could be potentially fooled. So that's pretty amazing. That's already out there. Also, you know those sort of like playful apps that show augmented emotions, and there are a whole lot of different examples where you can already see that. But I must admit that it's not, you know, a totally big thing already, a trend that, you know, every website should focus on, or every sort of like SEO should focus on. It's something that's still in the future, but it's something you should watch out for, because even current technology is actually you know, changing. So what are the implications for online marketers? Linguistic pragmatics deals with those aspects of linguistic meaning that depend on the context, for example, emotions. And linguistics, so we are just at the beginning of the sort of the pragmatical understanding of that level, and this should have an impact on the content we develop. So right now, you should be focusing on sort of like the user emotions in your content, and I will show you know, a technique of how you can do that. But before that, I'd like to also, you know, support this hypothesis that this is already playing a factor. So there's a Google patent from August 2017, and I must say that 2015, John Mueller said, and he's you know, from Zurich, and he pretty much took over the role of Matt Katzen, and he's communicating from a Google perspective about, you know, the developments with the algorithm and how this impacts websites. So he said, being asked about user signals, he said, so there are very different intents, and combining them makes for a really, really noisy signal, right? So he says they're totally complex and not that well to be interpreted by an algorithm. And then there's a Google patent in 2017, and it says, learn a correct ranking from noisy expressions. But this is pretty much what he said, noisy expressions of user preferences. So it seems like Google has been working on that and is working on that. So user signals seem to be playing a role. And then I actually met John Mueller, and I asked him again, and I said, how about those user signals? And he said, we're using user signals for A/B testing of algorithms. So I think more, he won't say more about it because, I mean, they have to be careful, because SEOs tend to overdo stuff, as we know, with the links. But it seems like they do play a role. And then we have this voice search hype, and you know, hype is sort of like in quotation marks. I mean that ironically, because I think it's not only a hype, it's a reality. And already 20% of all queries on smartphones conducted via Google app were using voice command, and 50% of all searches by 2020 will be voice searches. However, we know this is very dependent on the context. For example, if you are in the car or if you're on the go and you can't type, then you will use will most probably use voice. But what's the learning from that? There's no conclusive data on voice search optimization. You know, they're just, you know, basics you should watch out for. Schema.org optimization, Amazon optimization, local directory optimization. Also, just going beyond Google and looking at other platforms that, you know, because Alexa is the most predominant voice device, and not the Google Assistant. So you know, you should also look at where they get their data from, and usually they get their data from other local directories like Yelp and so on, and you should optimize those. But these are sort of like basics that you should do even without the voice search trend, but they just might make it more necessary. So these are sort of the changes we see in terms of the voice search, but we should also look at pragmatical optimization strategies, and I'm looking at this from a linguistically pragmatic perspective. So first of all, it's important that you speak to more senses with your content. So aesthetic visuals, atmospheric visual contents, pleasant sound, that kind of stuff. That's something you should do. But there's also sort of like an emotional content optimization model that we've developed and been working with. This is sort of like an aesthetic website, and an example. Sonos does that really well. You could check that out later on. But you have elements of sound. You have you can actually click it and interact with it, and it's a very aesthetically pleasing environment in which that is taking place. But now I'd like to show you something that is relevant to creating content for you right now. And first of all, I'd like to begin with the problem of selective attention. So how does attention work? Actually, there's a professor of psycholinguistics. His name is Semin Gun, and he said the main purpose of words is to direct the reader's attention to a selected sector of reality. Once that is accomplished, the reader's existing associations will take over to determine a reaction. So that's pretty important, because it means that if we look at content, it's pretty much it is able to create sort of a reality for the reader, and it's all about creating that through a very specific form of attention that we focus on specific parts of the content. If you look at it from a cognitive psychology point of view, then you have sensations, memories, and thought processes that really create the attention, and then and those form the actions. So controlled processes and automatic processes, we can't really tell whether they're subconscious actions or conscious actions, but they form the actions. So that's why, in terms of content development, we should not only look at semantic keyword optimization, but also look at the emotional content optimization. And for that, I've brought to you a model that I'd like to discuss. So it's sort of like user decision optimization. It's based on empathy. So first of all, you talk to the user in a way that he or she feels heard. Okay, they understand my situation. Then you talk about the problem, because you need a problem awareness for them to understand that they need a solution. And usually companies just focus on solutions because they want to portray themselves in a positive light. And then you have testimonials, because you want to show them that other users have identified with the product, because that's an important way of actually getting credibility. And I'll take a pretty tough example. So I'll take a commodity to show you how this model works, because there are other examples that might be too easy, where you'd say, okay, sure, with that example, I'm pretty sure that anybody could make a great content out of that. But a commodity is associated with dull, repetitive products, however useful, that generate low margins, like butter, or, for example, a mattress. But there was this mattress shop, and that generated more than $600 million in sales with a mattress. Okay, so let's look at it, and let's look at it from the perspective of the ESPT model, how they did that. And that's what I'd like to do. So let's start with empathy. Actually, what they do is, or what they did, rather, because they've since changed their website, but this is what they did initially. This is something they wrote. Buying a mattress can be really exhausting. How can they write that? They should write about how amazing their mattress is, not about exhaustion, the exhaustion of the buying process. But they do that because they generate empathy for the user. Perhaps you know the feeling. You're standing in a mattress store surrounded by thousands of different mattresses with no idea which one to buy or where to start. And as a user, you can definitely empathize with that. So it's a great way of getting the user involved. And then let's move over to the problem stage. So problems are good. Don't ever let anybody tell you that problems are really bad for communications. They're usually really good because they make the user understand that they need a solution. And here's the typical mattress shop, and they talk about solutions. Looked at the content, and it's like 90%, 87.5, but we don't need to. You can say 90% is about solutions, and then below that you have a little bit of a problem. You talk a little bit about problems. So that's not enough, and it becomes just a generic experience. You don't really feel heard or listened to. So you focus pretty much on the discounts, and that's what they offer. They offer a lot of discounts to be able to sell it, right? But this is what Casper did. It said, why not springs? Well, spring mattresses were invented in the 1800s, and they create uncomfortable pressure points. So they talk about problems, and they say, what's wrong with the memory foam? Well, you're sinking too deep into it, and that makes you feel stuck, right? And then after they've talked about those problems, they talk about the solution. What's great about hybrid foam? And that's a good way to frame a problem, because you get them to understand why the hybrid foam is the best option, but you get them to experience that, to experience the process of understanding it, right? And that will get them to buy the mattress even more, right? And then we'll come to the solution, and what they do is they have a pretty intelligent way of framing the solution. And what I'm saying is it's all about the sort of selective attention that you want to generate. So they say, okay, you have a risk-free trial, of 100 nights to try us out, right? So that's a huge barrier to buying a mattress, because it's a huge thing, and maybe you don't like it, and then it's a hustle and trouble, a lot of trouble to get it back, right? So but they say, well, just sleep on it 100 nights, right? So a lot of nights, and then if you ship it back, it's gonna be free, right? And then some people will think, well, that's environmentally pretty bad. But no, they're being donated to a local charity. So in the solution, they address pretty much every barrier a user might have to buying a mattress. That's a pretty intelligent way of framing a solution, right? So now we come to the testimonial stage. They have those testimonials. They're sort of like grammatically not really correct. They seem like actual user testimonials. I think that's not the strongest part. The strongest part is that they're using the fear of missing out. So that's pretty much FOMO. And Andrew Przybylski came up with this principle, and he says it's the uneasy and sometimes all-consuming feeling that you're missing out, that your peers are doing or know about something or possess of more or something better than you. And actually, what I found just looking at his profile pic on Twitter, I got the feeling of missing out because he was having such a great time. But Casper is using that in the testimonials because they use this pretty random number. And as I said, it's all about framing. It's all about your conscious attention of this mattress is loved by countless customers. And then this ginormous number of dreams dreamt, right? And it's sort of like statistical estimation of how they come up with that number. but it makes you have that feeling of missing out because so many people have enjoyed sleeping on that mattress, and shouldn't I be one of them, right? And it's a kind of a cool way to frame a testimonial. So there are some people that might say, well, the Casper mattress is just a superior product. But is it really? You use these different kind of foams? Well, I talked to a mattress expert. Some people might laugh about that, but I actually did. It's a company that produces mattresses. And he said, well, it's actually the problem with the Casper mattress is that, they produce one mattress for everybody, but there are different types of sleep. There are people who lie on their back and on their belly or whatever. And they need different mattresses. So from a product perspective, it's not a totally superior product. And you might say, well, but it's a pretty superior product for the price. Well, if you look at, for example, this Danish, e-commerce shop selling Danish mattresses, it's a pretty amazing mattress that they're selling, and it's at a similar price point. And then you might say, well, maybe it's not the price, but it's the return policy. And then you see Otto, for example, which is one of the largest online stores in Germany, and they have a 30-day return period. And I mean, it's not 100 days, but come on, you will know in 5 days that you don't sleep well on that mattress, right? So the 100 days are just a way of focusing the consumer on the lack of barrier and getting to buy the mattress. So actually, their secret is not the product, not the price. Their secret is the communication of their product. And they're pretty much using this model consciously or subconsciously. They're using this model, but I'm pretty sure they're using it consciously to sell their product. And what I mean is that we as content people, content marketers, or even SEOs, we can have a huge impact on the business if we're being heard and if we can actually use those principles to frame content in a way that the user will appreciate it. And this is sort of like the technique and model that I'd like to give you. And if you, this is sort of like the end of the presentation. If you want the slides, you can just send an email to fionn@saxido.de. And also, you can download the white paper on Searchmetrics on the knowledge base because it gets into more detail. You can just download it and use it in your everyday, experience. And then, Daniel, maybe you can say something about the content experience as well before we go straight into the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Fionn. Last but not least, you can go ahead and discover our content experience. So in my slides, I actually showed you a screenshot of the content experience quickly when I talked about the specifics of online texts. And one specific of online text is that it's measurable, and then you can add data to it. And the content experience basically allows you to write at the first place to make online research and to discover topics with the topic graph. So not only research based on keywords, but whole topics. So we provide you with more background information and more words related to that core topic. And then you are also able to write content in an interactive environment, providing you with information about keyword coverage and performance of the text. So if you're interested, go on the website and have a look, or maybe even schedule a demo with us. We're happy to show you everything. And basically that's it. Fionn, we hit the plan. 45 minutes have been planned for the webinar. So there's a few more minutes left for you for questions. I get no questions coming in so far, so feel free to ask us some questions. We have some minutes left. I have actually two questions for you, Fionn. The first one is, and maybe that's even more the most important one for the viewers of the webinar, what are your top 3 takeaways? Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Turn on the camera again.
Hi.
What are your top 3 takeaways from the webinar? So what do you want the viewers of the webinar to take with them?
I think what I'd like you to take with you from that webinar is that you're starting to focus on sort of like the psychological context of the user, and there's definitely one focus on intent. What intent do they have? So that's sort of like progressing from what I said about, you know, the emotional dimension of content. So what intent do they have, and can you satisfy that intent? Because that makes it a little more applicable to different situations. And then the other part is to use what you know about, for example, semantics, and what you can also use in the content experience to use that in combination with sort of like that psychological understanding. And I think what's quite important as well, and this is the second point, is that content marketers should be at the forefront of the company. They should also be determining or at least sit at the table when it comes to the strategic communication of what you're trying to convey with your product and services. So that's also quite important. And I think this will happen much more in the future, because this is the way technology is going to turn. And the third thing is just think about where the technology is going to go. Think about that, and think about the progression the technology is making right now to get to that place. And then you will understand how important it is to focus on sort of like the pragmatic level of linguistics. And just think about, it's happening right now already. How can I optimize it in my daily projects and processes?
Very well said, Fionn. And basically, you also answered my second question already. So keeping an eye on the Q&A section with no questions coming in so far, I would say let's end this webinar and let people go back to work. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Please hang in there for 30 more seconds and tell us what you think on our little survey. We really appreciate it. And see you next time. Thanks, Fionn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.